Good evening. It is Thursday, September 26, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. I'm calling the special Fraser Council meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bransky.
Present.
Mayor Lessig.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Dell.
Here.
Councilmember Perry.
Here.
Councilmember Jornet.
Present.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sutherland.
Present.
All right. Thank you very much. Item number 4, approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. I second it.
Okay, motion to approve the agenda made by Councilmember Bransky, seconded by Councilmember Stein. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did you have something?
Yeah, are we amending the agenda?
No.
Moving this? Here, is he here?
No, we're going to do this first, set the public hearing.
Oh,
Okay. I think we cleared up I think our guest is here.
okay.
All right.
So you can do the vote.
All right,
Sorry, I
yes.
messed it up.
So, motion by Councilmember Baranski, seconded by Councilmember Stein to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The agenda is approved. Are you Mr. Kazar?
I am.
Okay. Do you have a presentation tonight?
I can put it on the thumb drive real quick.
Okay, you do that, and then you can get that over to Mr. Horn over there. Thank you. All right. Item number 5, citizen participation. That's on agenda items, and we have a very short agenda, so if we can, we're going to set the public hearing in just a minute, if that's what you're here to speak on.
I'm set to speak on the citizen participation on that agenda item before it's voted.
Okay, you can speak now or you can speak then.
I'd rather speak now and get it ahead of time like I'm following the process.
That's fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kent Stonebreaker, 32309 Oxford Court.
Can you move that mic toward
This way?
Yeah, it works better that way.
Okay, good. It's louder. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here to speak on item 6, subset A. I am in a disagreement with the item even being on the agenda. As a former planning commissioner and vice chairman of the planning commission, I know that the present commissioners did their job reviewing the plans, the area, and listening to the public. They came to the proper conclusion. This is not the proper site for this business. The master plan was started while I was on the planning commission and completed after I left. Why should any commission put the time and effort into developing a master plan if council just throws it out? This is the last corner at 14 Mile and Utica Road that hasn't had a gas station on it. It is almost the center of the city. Why should the citizens accept the risk of contamination on this last clean corner? Since we don't want to talk about the public hearing, I'm going to skip my next paragraph. If there are people in the city that absolutely need a Sheetz product, close that too. In closing, I believe this would be a mistake to even entertain the idea of a special meeting to move this along.
Okay, thanks.
Skip my opportunity. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak at this time, or would you like to speak on the next motion? Oh, come on up.
Vanya Apps, 31641 York Street. Mayor, council, city manager, I just want to bring your attention to what I felt happened at the planning commission meeting when I was in the back of a packed room. What I was hearing from the people standing there is they did not get proper notice. Please, when we go through this process, please make sure the residents around that area get proper notice. I just want to put that out there. I don't want to see that happen when this comes back up to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time, or? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to new business item 6A. Set public hearing date and time for consideration of RZ 23-02, the Sheetz conditional rezoning application. City manager.
As you're aware, this has gone through the process with Planning Commission, and the final step would be for it to come to City Council for consideration. The attorneys have been working on preparing this and getting it ready for you, And they are now at this point where they are ready to have a public hearing for discussion and consideration of the item.
Have they submitted the final application?
Twice.
I mean,
They have done a resubmit. Yeah.
okay, so it's all set and done, and it's ready for review
Yes.
and consideration by the council. Okay. Councilmember Baranski.
So if I'm understanding correctly, though, we wanted it to be after our next regular meeting. Is that still the recommendation?
One of the considerations is that there's a 15-day requirement for public notice.
No, I get why we're deciding it now, but because I'm looking at my schedule, and I thought that the directive was to try to hold it after the next regular.
Correct, towards the end of October. That would give
Okay.
everyone time to review it and have our questions answered.
Okay, so then in that capacity, I am going to be out of town from like the 23rd to the 30th of October, just so you guys know.
Okay. Let's do dates. Are you around at the end of
I don't see any problems.
first week of November or last week of October? Okay. Let's see, who else? Anybody else got dates and they are not available?
I am not available on the 29th.
All right. And 29th is a Tuesday, is that? Is that a Tuesday?
Yes.
I could probably do the 30th, if you're looking at the last week of October.
We are looking, the available dates,
Or Halloween, I'm free.
so the 30th, you would be,
I think so. I think I come back that day.
okay. So 30th, Councilmember Shornack, you're good with that? I'm just trying to get a date that,
30th works for me.
okay, 30th works for me. So we've got one,
There's
two,
nothing on there at this time.
She's out of town, too.
all right, I got 5 that works for Ken, you're good too?
For Devil's Night?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should be
It's Angels
fine.
Night now. Did you not get the memo?
We'll get you out in time.
I'll be, yeah.
I'm good with the 30th also.
All right. Then would someone like to make a motion to set the public
I
hearing?
would just like to make a couple quick comments. I did get the schedule of the attorney, so he is available on the 30th as well, so that's fortunate.
Yep.
And just reminding everyone that we will not be able to have it in council chambers because we have early voting in here, so we'll need to work on finding an alternate location. We've kind of been exploring the option of maybe at the Senior Activity Center, though with HUD regulations, it might be a little challenging, talking about penalties and everything. We could certainly explore that more. However, there are other potential places in the city that we could handle a crowd up to about 200, possibly Vintage or
Vintage House.
Infinity Hall. This is something with a special meeting that Sheetz would be paying for it, or they should be paying for it. So we would need to figure out really what the location would be for that.
Okay.
And that means therefore, any date in that week would be out for the City Hall location.
Yes,
Because it starts 26th.
yes. And given the crowd that we had before, and I expect a similar or larger crowd next time.
Other than if we go after November 5th.
What time are we thinking?
6:30, I'd say.
Normal 6:30?
Right.
Yeah, normal 6:30. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to ask if we could go a little earlier, because based on the crowd that was at the Planning Commission meeting, I suggest we try to have it a little bit earlier, because it might be a long night.
Okay, I wouldn't want to start any earlier than 6.
That's fine.
Well, 6 is, yeah.
Six-
6 is fine,
Six
but I'm
works
just
for
saying,
every-
like, let's
Okay.
try to,
That's fair. So a couple points. One is notification. Notification's absolutely important to me. And we will make sure everyone is notified. Will there be any signs put up on that corner? Like I've seen in other communities that say a conditional rezoning has been applied for this property?
I don't see any reason why we couldn't do something like
I
that.
think we should. I think just so everyone knows, and that the date, the location will determine soon, but tonight we want to get the date so that we have something. Councilmember Stein.
Also, are we sending letters to the neighbors that are around there? Like direct letters telling them?
Yes, that's the notice.
So I think that we were planning on doing like a 300-foot notice.
Okay. I just want to
It's
make
not
sure
something
those
that
residents are.
is required. I don't believe.
It's required.
It's
I-
required?
Even if it's not required, I think.
Required, right, Ken?
100%
Yeah,
required.
yeah.
For the
Either
city
way,
council,
we'll
you're
do
talking,
it.
it's required for the planning commission and the zoning commission. It may not be required. So let's make the motion to do it. That way,
right.
whether it's
I think we need to do
required
it
or
no matter
not,
what.
it's done. Consistent with what's required, right?
We've been down the notification road.
Yeah.
Ken and I are committed to that. I don't even have to ask Mr. Perry. So, all right, you all said, Councilmember Bransky?
Well, the other thing I was going to add in, because there's sometimes some confusion about it, I think that at this special meeting, we need to set the rule that there will be a time limit for public speaking, even though I think that already exists, but I want it to be fully transparent, so.
For a public hearing, we have to set that time limit immediately before that particular public hearing. What I was thinking is, given that we have a lot of people, bring it up now, that we have a 3-minute, and then if you want, after everyone speaks, if you want to come back and speak for 2 more, you can.
That's fine.
And then that way, because a lot of people are going to have a similar statement, and I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak. So we can work out the details on that later. Yeah, in a minute, Mr. Slufo. So October 30th, Wednesday at 6 PM. Did somebody make that motion? I forget.
I'll make the motion. So I make a motion to have the public hearing for consideration of Sheetz on October 30th at 6 PM. Location to be determined.
With a minimum notification of 300 feet from the,
Okay, with a minimum notification of 300 feet to residents.
or to property owners, yes. Okay. Motion, yes, I heard you.
Okay.
Motion by Councilmember Stein, second by Councilmember Sutherland, or Mayor Pro Tem Sutherland. All right, citizen participation. Who would like to speak on this matter? Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I think it would be a good idea to make it later than the 30th. I think you're talking about the 30th, I think is the date, because of the idea that this room would be used for other purposes, and it would forego doing any other location. I think it should be done later because for a couple different reasons. One, the people that did attend that planning meeting and voiced their concerns, they know now to come here. In other words, they already been here. That could cause some confusion, and some of those people maybe get frustrated and not be able to speak. So I think really we should look at a different date for that particular meeting because it does kind of overlap with the election, and it would forego any other confusion that could possibly take place. I think that would be a good sign of effort of being, like I say, upfront and obvious with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Councilmember Baranski.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was speaking with the clerk about, is there, because that is my concern, is I don't want someone to not come. So is November 6th too late for that
Day
meeting?
after the election?
Or November 7th? I was just trying to say when chamber was going to be available.
November
That's why I
7th
picked
is
that.
ZBA.
Okay, so what about the 6th?
The 6th, they'll probably be cleaning everything up from in here. I don't know if it will.
Or it'll be planning
cleaned up and
commission.
done.
So it has to be the following week already. Then you push out another week.
Cindy's saying they can make it work.
Councilmember Shornack.
I don't know about
I
availability.
don't think, and I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think that everybody's tuned into this because I've been getting texts like crazy people. I think everybody who wants to voice their opinion on this, whatever side they're on, they know, and they will be looking for that notification. And I am sure it'll be posted on Facebook multiple times. So I'm sure if anybody wants to know where the location, the time, and everything's going to be once it's set, I am sure there is a way they will find out. They either all have our numbers or multiple people have our numbers, and or it'll be on the webpage, it'll be on the roly-poly, it'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Enough, it'll be on here and there. I don't think a location is going to be a problem. I don't think we have to sit here and play with 60 million dates and bounce this around for an hour for that specific reason. There are so many ways of communicating. I guarantee you, if anybody who's actually interested in this and cares about voicing their opinion, they're going to know. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. Councilmember Perry.
I just want to make sure if it's not held here, that, are we going to still record it at another location?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, it will be televised. It'll be recorded, and my goal is to have basically a council meeting somewhere else.
Okay.
And with enough room so that people can all be in the room. I sat out there, and we had AV problems. And that frustrated me. I came here with a camera to make sure that we still got it. So absolutely, I want everyone and each and every person interested to be able to come to the meeting, hear everything, speak their mind, and then potentially we make a decision that night either to take a definitive action or other things that come up. But really, I want to make sure everybody gets their opportunity to speak. You already spoke, Mr.
I just have a quick question.
Quickly.
Why is the senior center out?
We're not seniors. Because we're not all seniors.
Okay, all right.
Because we're not all seniors.
Okay, hold on.
Sorry.
Okay. We're working on a venue that makes sure we have plenty of room, so to be determined. We're not putting the notice in the paper tomorrow. So, yes, Mr. Slufo. Quickly, let's just get this, let's wrap this up because this is a very.
I think we should really, my opinion is that we should really think about having a governmental policy meeting done in a governmental policy room that we use. This is the chamber room. This is used for policies. Our city managers here. This is the room people recognize as a room that kind of discussion would take place. It's unfortunate some had to sit in the hallway. I understand that, but they understand that this is, if you will, this is where the buck stops when it comes to government business. So I think it should be held here. To put it off into another venue, I think kind of is kind of dings our government process here.
Well, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments from the audience? Come on up. Oh, hold on, we've got somebody right there.
How you doing? Edie Pearson, 16440 14 Mile Road. I'm right next door to this development, and I'm just kind of stunned that we're here after the last meeting, and the people voiced their displeasure with this. Why would we want to put this circus in the middle of our city is all I'm saying. How did it get pushed forward after everybody said, no, we don't want this here?
I can answer that question. Normally, when we're having citizen participation, we let you talk to us. So, but I'll explain this very carefully. The Planning Commission, the process for a conditional rezoning has a Planning Commission component, and even if that is, the recommendation is no, the applicant can continue to the full council. That is by law, they're allowed to do that. So that's how we got to this.
Very good.
And-
I think it was Madison Heights just turned them down. These huge cities are turning them all down because of noise, light.
Well, I spoke to the
all
mayor.
that.
I spoke to the mayor of Madison Heights. I saw her last night. Talked to her last week about it. And that was a full council action, just like this one, exactly the same process that we had, that we are going to have. So that's why we're here at this point. It could be 15,000 people say no, the applicant still can come here and petition the council for that option.
Very good.
So-
Thank you.
Yep, and we're going to make sure everyone knows that it's happening, so. You're welcome. Sir?
Good evening, Mark Richter, 16330 Gordon. Just sitting there and all of a sudden, boom, it pops up my feed and go, I gotta get down, so I rode my bike down here really quick to meet with you guys. Yeah, the Sheetz thing, I don't care if we do it here or where we do it, just as long as everybody knows and we got enough room. And, I was here last time, it was fine, stay on the lobby, as long as the video works. With Sheetz, what part don't they understand? That we don't want them at that location.
Well, I hear. This is not the night to talk about pro or con, and I want to make sure everybody has enough time. I think every council member here wants to hear from the public, and I hope that we do, and that you now have a month, the public has a month to prepare their statement and do their thing. I've been on that side many times, Mr. Perry and
When I get home, I'll catch up on the video, what I missed on the ride over, too.
Yep.
Are we in open comments right now, or is this specifically Sheetz?
This is simply about the setting the public hearing date and time for
Okay.
Sheetz conditional rezoning.
All right.
That's all that it says tonight. All right. Any other members of the public? Mr. Farina, did you want to speak since you just walked in? We're setting the public hearing date and time at October 30th at 6 o'clock. So,
Well, we're voting on that.
okay. All right, we have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This will be October 30th, 6 o'clock. Location to be determined hopefully very soon. And then along with the AV and all, we've got a lot of other things to do. All right, we are now here at the exciting part of 6B, the utility rate presentation by Municipal Analytics. Come on up.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Good evening, good day.
Oh my God, thank you.
I didn't know.
Technology working, we'll proceed.
Would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is John Kazor. I am with Municipal Analytics.
And the microphone works best if it's right in
Right in
front of
front of me, okay.
you. It's not you, it's the microphone.
So John Kazor with Municipal Analytics. We were contracted to do the water and sewer rate study for the city, and I am here tonight to present the initial findings and recommendations, and then get some further direction, feedback from council about how to proceed from this point.
All right, take it away, it's all yours.
Just a quick overview of what we were engaged to do, primarily to build a rate model for the city that the city will own and be able to use should they want to. We're looking at the total costs of the water and sewer utilities and trying to figure out how to recover those costs through your rates and charges. So that's the high-level view of what we're trying to do here. That includes your operations and maintenance costs, your capital, your debt, any costs that are associated with this. Your primary costs are what you pay to Great Lakes Water Authority for your treated water, as well as for the wastewater that's sent to them for treatment. So that's your biggest cost. You also have a capital plan that needs to be implemented. You have some outstanding debt. The city's debt is really just one issue for water, but you have a number of debt obligations to the Macomb and Oakland-Macomb interceptor districts for wastewater. So those debts are not issued by the city, but issued by those districts, and the city is part of that, so you are allocated a proportional share of those debts. We also looked at what you need to have in reserves for cash, and make sure your rates are sustaining that cash reserve. And I'll just say that for cash reserves, it's really important to think of it in several mindsets. One is cash is good because you've got to pay your bills. You need to be able to write those checks and get things paid. Another is there are emergencies that happen in utilities, as I'm sure you're aware. Water main breaks, backups, that sort of thing. If you don't have cash on hand, it's really hard to get those done in a timely fashion. It's really hard to go to the bank in the middle of the night to get a loan. So you need to make sure you've got money there for that. You also have the opportunity, if you have sufficient cash, to take advantage of any grant opportunities that might come your way. And as we've seen in the past, there are often federal laws, state legislation that's approved that is for, quote, shovel-ready projects. So if you've got things on the drawing boards and ready to go, they will give you a grant if you can match a percentage of that. So it's really important that you have enough cash to take advantage of any leveraging that you can. Right now, the cash position for the city's water and sewer fund is quite healthy, and we'll talk about what to do about that as we go through this. So again, the rates are really intended to cover the costs. So this is an enterprise fund. The customers of this service, the water and sewer, are responsible for paying for the costs of the service. So it's like your electric bill or your cable bill. You are paying for the service that you get. And that, again, includes the operations, the staffing, the insurance, the electricity, all of that, as well as your capital and your debt.
You might just say next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Go to the next one. You can skip the next one.
Next slide.
There we go. So the rates are broken into two components, and your current rate structure aligns with this pretty well. You've got a user charge, a usage charge, and that is for each 100 cubic feet, which is 748 gallons of water. That's 1 unit of water. And that's trying to recover the variable cost of the system. So as people use water, there's some costs that go up, primarily your cost paid to Great Lakes Water for your water. Also, you don't have a lot of electricity, but there are some costs that go up as usage goes up. The capacity charge, or base charge, or ready to serve, in this city it's called the ready to serve charge, or RTS, that's intended to recover the fixed portion of your utility costs. That's usually debt, it's a chunk of capital, it's some of your staffing, et cetera. Your sewer charge from Great Lakes Water Authority is 100% fixed. It does not matter how much water goes down the pipe to their treatment process. You get charged a flat amount, irrespective. What you're recovering from your fixed charge on sewer is pretty inadequate to cover those costs. So we'll talk about what to do about that. The ready-to-serve charge is based on meter size, so a larger customer puts more demand on the system. And the ready-to-serve, in addition to covering some of the fixed costs, is also covering the assets of the system. So if you imagine what's underground for these systems, you've got pipes and pumps, primarily, you've got hydrants and all these other things that are under there. If a single-family household is built with a 5/8-inch meter, they're expected to use a certain amount of water. When you increase the size of that meter to service a larger organization or an industry, the size of the meter increases, the amount of water that can flow through that increases. So as your engineers are looking at designing a system or maintaining the system, they're looking at what's the capacity or the potential demand required of all of your customers. So we use a thing called meter ratios to establish kind of an equilibrium. In some places it's called a residential equivalent unit, or REU. So we're trying to equalize everybody's base costs, this ready to serve, based on their meter size. It's very unlikely that every single customer in the city would turn their taps on full volume at exactly the same moment and demand all of the water they can demand. However, the system has to be designed to handle that eventuality. And then on top of that, fire suppression. So there's a lot that's going on in these systems, so that ready-to-serve charge is intended to recover those costs and proportionately allocate the costs to your customers based on their potential demand. We talked about the 5/8-inch meter, and again, when we do these rate studies, we often use the American Water Works Association's, or AWWA's, standard meter ratios. They just measure how much water can flow through the size of a pipe in a minute. And there's a multiplication, it's X value per diameter. So that's what we used in the study. The current ratios that you have in place, we're not sure where they came from. But they've been there for a while, so we can talk about possibly changing those and modifying it to align with the AWWA standard ratios. We can go to the next slide, which looks like a blank slide. No, there it is.
It's not a blank slide.
All right, so historical rates. The last study was done in 2017 by Plant Moran, and they had a schedule for rate adjustments. The city has not followed that. As you can see there on the bottom charts, on the left two charts, the ready-to-serve charge for sewer and for water have not changed since at least 2019. So nothing's changed there, zero change at all. And on the commodity, the far right chart, your sewer commodity rate is only 30 cents per unit more now than it was in 2019. Water's gone up a little bit more, but it hasn't changed in the last 3 years. So rates have been very stagnant in the city. So we're trying to overcome some of this and get the city back on the plan that was implemented previously. And then this is a process, I'll say this multiple times, this is a process that needs to be reviewed and updated annually. This can't be an every 5 or 7 year process to review the rates. It's important because, A, Great Lakes water rates change all the time. We've got assumptions in there about how they're going to change, but we can't predict what they're actually going to do. Your customer base is going to change. Demand is going to change. Technology is going to change. People's desire for water is going to change. The weather is going to change. Your capital plan, the cost for materials is going to change. We can't assume that this model today can predict what things are going to be in 2031. That's just unrealistic. So this is a process that needs to be done every year, and I'm encouraging you now, if you can't hear it very resolutely, to review this every year. Make sure that we're not stuck with this no increase. Okay, go to the next slide. And this is just a quick review. We looked at the costs again, the O&M costs. We layered in your capital improvement plan and your debt service costs. And again, you do have the one issue for water, that is a city debt, and then multiple debt issues from the Oakland, Macomb, and Macomb interceptor districts that you are paying on for your proportional share of that. Right now, we've assumed that all of the capital in the capital plan will be funded with cash or from your rates, no new debt to fund the capital plan at this point.
Question for you. You say we have one outstanding city water debt obligation. We also have the Hayes Interceptor sewer, which is a sewer.
There are many, you've got many.
This was a city project.
Right, and that, we do have one, yes, that is
Okay.
true.
There's
gonna
a
be
sewer
one.
and a water.
Yes.
All right. I just wanna
Sewer's relatively small compared to the,
It was $10 million
I think,
in 2009 or something like that. But
so yes, you're right, there is one.
okay. Just wanna make
You're talking about the gravity flow on Hayes, that
Yeah.
$8 million? I thought that was $8 million.
it somewhere between it. It was whatever. Yeah, I just want to make sure that was a loan we took out, and just want to make sure that was included.
We've accounted for the debt.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
The cash reserves, I mentioned those earlier. Let me talk about what we're basing those on. So we are setting our reserve target to equal 3 components. One is 25% of your operations and maintenance costs. That's your cash flow or working capital number. 100% of debt service, having enough in there in your reserves to pay the next year's debt service. Bondholders like that. You feel good about it. You know that those payments can be made. And then the third component is the average capital improvement plan over the next 5 years. So taking the total capital plan and looking at it on an average basis for 5 years, that's what we're using for that. And again, that's where you leverage some opportunities to get things done early or to take advantage of grants.
That's a 1 year of the 5.
One of the 5, yes. Yeah.
Annual expenditure.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, then we tested the rates and made sure that they meet the reserve targets and cover the costs. And then it's important, from my perspective, to try to smooth the rates as much as possible. So when we look at this, and you saw it in the report, we have an initial increase, and then it just kind of peters down to a more standard, steady rate increase. And again, we can accomplish that if it's being updated every year. Otherwise, we're looking at, I think last time there was a 30% increase, which we try to avoid at all costs if we can. Going to the next.
When you say the 30%, that was the 2017, the
Yes.
last time we did it?
Yes.
Okay.
So the rate strategy that we're recommending is maintaining what you have now. So you've got a commodity charge and a ready-to-serve charge. We want to modify the ready-to-serve charge. It's still based on meter size, but we want to start shifting some of that, the ratios, to the AWWA standard ratios. So we're doing that over a 3-year time period in the model so that we smooth it out and avoid some rate shock as much as we can. We're also looking at increasing the ready-to-serve to recover more of the revenue for the cost, the fixed cost of your system. Your sewer, again, is almost 100% fixed cost. And yet your revenue is, I think, only about 20% fixed revenue. So we want to try to balance that out a little bit. And over the 5 years in the model, we are moving that ready-to-serve revenue from that low number up to about 60%, so that we're getting a higher number That's what's going to help your rate stability and your cash flow stability.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because right now, like you said, 80% of our sewer charge is, or sewer revenue is based on usage.
Yes.
Even though we pay, we could put as much as we want theoretically into the system and we wouldn't pay anymore.
Yes.
So why is it important to shift that rate to the fixed cost versus the variable cost?
It's because your variable rate is based on metered water usage. And if you know you have a cool, wet summer, people use less water. And that's where most of the water gets used is in the summer. So if we're not using the water in the summer, you're not collecting a variable revenue. The other thing that changes is people's usage just in general. There's a trend to use less and less water. We're buying more water-efficient devices. We're getting smarter about using less water. So overall, our water usage is going down. If you are relying heavily on a volumetric revenue and the volume is going down, your revenue is going to go down or your rate has to go up. And the irony of it is the more you increase your variable rate, the less people use. So you have to increase it even more, and people use less. So we want to try to balance this out so that we've got a good mix of a fixed charge that's providing, again, the stability that you need, and the variable that allows people to modify their costs by using less. So that's why. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And then again, I will say it, adjust the rates annually to maintain the stability and the revenue requirements. So again, 3-year transition, going to the next slide, looking at the rates now and okay, well, that slide should have some tables on it. I don't know, I'm seeing them on my computer, but they're not up there. Do you have the report in front of you?
I do.
Okay.
Before we move on, can we just, I think it's important for AWA meter ratios, what does that mean in real life?
Okay.
Between, I know what they are, but I think it would be helpful to the rest of the council and the public.
Sure. Let me get them up here.
Sure. And explain how they work in real life.
Right, okay. So a 5/8" meter, 20 gallons per minute flow through a 5/8" meter. So if we're using a 5/8" meter as the base, that's the lowest meter size that you have in the city. A 1" meter, 50 gallons can flow through a 1" meter in that same time. So that's 2.5 times the amount of water that's flowing through that same pipe or larger pipe. That increases as we go to a 1.5" meter. Now we're at 100 gallons, which is 5 times the amount that flows through a 5/8" meter. A 2" is 160 times, so that's 8 times the amount of water. And again, 8 times the amount of piping, pumping capacity that you have to have in your system to service that one customer. Yes, it's one customer, but they can put 8 times the amount of demand on the system compared to a 5/8" meter. A 3" meter is 15 times, so it's 300 gallons per minute. 4" is 500 gallons per minute or 25 times, and it just keeps going up like that. So those are the AWWA standard ratios that we refer to when we do that.
So let's go with a building that has a apartment building that has a 2" water meter.
Mm-hmm.
So you called it a REU?
You can call it, sure.
So a 2", what's the multiplier on a 2" meter?
8.
Okay, so that's the equivalent of 8 residential
Correct.
equivalent units or 8 single-family homes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you go with a 4" meter, it's what, 25 or?
Yes, 25 times.
6 inches, 50. And so what it means is the bigger the meter, so a commercial building like this building probably has an 1.5" or 2" meter.
Mm-hmm.
This would be 8 REUs. The usage potential for this building would be 8 times what a
single-family
single-
home. Correct.
So that's the meter ratios. The fixed charge that we calculate is based on these meter ratios. You asked where they came from. They came from the Plant Moran study.
Okay, I didn't see the specifics in there about where they,
Yeah, I found them.
okay,
But they are in there and they never changed.
okay.
But the idea here is that every single-family home, or most single-family homes, I think, under your model, pay the same fixed charge.
Yes.
Is that correct? All right.
And a small business that might have a 5/8" meter, sure. If you have just an office building with a single lavatory, they don't need anything bigger than a 5/8" meter.
Now, there are homes like in our neighborhood, I live near him, we have 1-inch meters, and we're still residential users. Is that AWA meter ratio, are you proposing
So-
to apply that too?
That is the plan at this point, and I understand that there are some residential, and I don't know how many because you don't have that information in your billing software.
It's 866 as of 2017.
I'm sorry?
It was like over 800.
Okay.
Like in our sub, we got 500 homes maybe? Yeah,
Okay.
so it's at least that in our neighborhood, and there's other neighborhoods. But
So we can look at how to modify that. And in instances in other communities that I've worked in, we can create a residential class. Unfortunately, we can't assign them because we don't have that code in the billing software. So we don't know which accounts are residential versus commercial. That's just not there, it doesn't exist. So we can look at ways to make that work. If we combine all 5/8 and all 1-inch, then we're going to also include some commercial and equalize them. But that's how you're doing it now. I understand that. And we can look at continuing the current ratios if that's the preference of the council. I'm just following a straight
the current
methodology.
ratios being the current AWA ratios we have?
The current ratios that you are using combine a 5/8 and a 1-inch together as the same
Correct.
single unit.
Yes.
Yes. And when I looked at the ratios, they are closer to what would be using a 3/4" meter as the basis. You don't have 3/4" meters, but that is closer to where those numbers are. And again, if the decision for the city is to move everybody to a 1-inch minimum size or to a 3/4", that makes it a little bit easier to accommodate that. I would certainly suggest getting the class of customer into your database so that we can do better analysis. But at this point, that's not available. So I do think that looking at different options, and I will be asking for your direction on this. You're the policymakers, so we need some direction. But just applying the straight AWWA ratios, that's what they are. So does that answer your question there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the next slide, this slide should have some tables on it. I don't know, if we go back to that last one, sorry. They're still not there. I don't know what happened. But I'll just talk through an illustration. So currently, a 5/8" and a 1-inch meter on their water ready to serve is $15.16 per month. The rate methodology that we used would change the 5/8" meter from $15.16 to $9.85. And the 1-inch meter would change from $15.16 to $14.77. So we're seeing a decrease in the water ready-to-serve charge on those, and there's reasons for that I can talk about. The commodity rate on water is going up from $5.48 to $7.79. So again, we're trying to rebalance how much is coming from fixed and variable, and I'm looking at the total bill. So it's not just water or just sewer, we're looking at the total bill. So here we're seeing a decrease in the ready-to-serve and an increase in commodity. On the sewer side, the first year change would be from $10.10 a month for a 5/8" or 1-inch to $17.89 for a 5/8" and $26.83 for a 1-inch. And the usage rate would go down from $10.44 per unit to $9.60 per unit. So this is all just smoothing out. Bottom line, if you're looking at a 5/8" meter, customer using about 4.5 units per month, we're looking at a change of about 9.4% in the total water sewer bill. And since we're talking about 1-inch, let me look at what a 1-inch would do. So the 1-inch customers do use more water on average. So the average usage of a 1-inch meter is 8 units per month. So their bill would, total water and sewer bill would increase from 152 to 180.
That's a-
18% increase,
18%?
yes, for 1-inch.
That's a 1-inch meter. And is that with the 2.5? Is that in year 3?
This is year one.
Year 1, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So again, there's likely concerns about how that would be implemented. It's difficult to change from a legacy rate structure to a different rate structure, and when we start doing that, the impacts are all over the place about how people and different customers are impacted.
Councilmember Baranski had a question.
Yep. So thanks, I was waiting for the shoe to drop, and it dropped big, because I think I have a 1-inch pipe. What happens if we don't adjust rates?
What do you mean don't adjust, if we don't adjust the meter ratios?
Like, we haven't increased, we haven't done anything. You said we've stayed stagnant. We've, in essence, ignored the prior water study rate. And I'm not just trying to sound flippant, but we're here, we're still paying the bill.
Yes, yep.
Bills are high. So if we don't do this, what is your professional recommendation about the negative consequences from maintaining the status quo?
I wouldn't say there's negative consequences. It's a matter of who's paying for what. So we're still trying to generate the same amount of money. So it's
Okay.
just who's paying what. So I just changed it. So if we go back to the current rate structure in terms of the meter ratios, the 1-inch would go from 152 to 171, which is a 12.5% increase, and the 5/8 inch with a 4.5 units would go from 96 or 97 to 111, so which is a 14.5% increase.
So if we're just trying to reallocate so that you're more accurately paying for your use, which is, I think, what you kind of said, right? That's what I heard. I don't know if that's what you meant. Who's going to pay less?
So so we're
Who's the
doing
winner in this?
we're doing multiple things here.
Okay,
So if we ignore, I've now got the model set to your current rate structure in terms of ratios. So now we're trying to adjust still for increasing the ready to serve to generate more revenue, so you have the revenue stability. So,
or repairs?
Can I I want to clarify your question, because I'm not sure he understands your question. Can I?
I think he does. I mean,
Well, you said if we keep, and I just want to make sure I understand.
Okay, go ahead.
You said if we don't change the rates, what are the negative consequences?
Right. And he answered that.
Okay, and
Well, he answered why we're doing it, which is to make sure people are paying for what they're using more accurately.
if your meters are working and your rates are being applied, then people are being paid. They're being charged and paid for accuracy, if we want to say that.
Well, yeah, it wasn't the implication that it was inaccurate. It's the whole larger pipe, smaller pipe.
Right, so proportionally.
That's the word.
So yes, a larger customer puts a larger demand on the system, so they should pay proportionately a higher fixed cost.
Right.
What's happening when we try to address the meter ratio issue and increasing the ready to serve to generate more revenue for that revenue stability, then that ready to serve number is getting hit twice. So we're increasing it for the larger meters, first of all, to adjust what they, quote, should be under the AWWA ratios. And we're also shifting more of the costs to the ready to serve for everybody so that we can get more fixed revenue. That's what's going on. What's the impact? If we don't change rates enough, you won't be able to fund your capital plan.
Okay.
So here's the issue. Back in 2017, Plant Moran based on your engineer's recommendations, we're assuming you would spend $15 million on water and sewer capital between 2018 and 2021, 22. You spend less than 10 million. So at the same time, your cash balance has gone up quite a bit, which was another goal of the plant study, that you increase your cash. But you've been underfunding your capital. So even though rates haven't gone up, your cash balance has gone up because you haven't been spending on capital.
Because we got lucky or because we didn't need it?
Because you didn't do it.
Okay, I know we didn't do it. Why did we not? Maybe that's
I don't
not a
know why
question
you
to you. Maybe
didn't do
that's a
it.
question. Okay, fair enough. But you're not saying either way. You can't say either way why we didn't do it.
I don't know why. I just know, again, where we're at right now.
Right.
So what we're trying to do in all of this complexity to soften the impact on rates is to use some cash. So we are spending down the $10 million that you have in cash down to where it, quote, should be, closer to, what's the number here? Sorry. 7.2 million. So we're taking your cash balance down, and that's what's going to help offset some of these rate increases. If we took that out and you maintain $10 million, rates would go up substantially more. So we're using that cash to soften the impact.
So the 9.4% increase and the 18% increase presume $3 million in cash going towards the water for the next year. Okay.
Yes.
Water's
Yes.
expensive.
And that's 3 million of capital improvement into water mains or sewer.
Yes, and most of your capital is on the water side. So you have about 16 to 18% unaccounted for or water loss. So every time Detroit sends you a bill, about 18% of that variable cost is wasted because you don't know where the water's going. So that's leaks, that's hydrants, that's various things. And that's why it's important to plug any leaks in your system and make sure you're actually getting the water delivered and not leaking into the ground.
Councilmember Odell has a question.
So you're saying over the last 5 years, we haven't been spending enough on our infrastructure based on the cash balance that we had?
And based on the capital plan that was,
So basically, the planners for our infrastructure have not been allotting enough, basically. Am I hearing that correctly, or?
I don't know what the budget process has been for the past 5 years. Again, you've spent just under 10 million. We had a pretty major pandemic in there. And the price of everything went up, and I know a lot of communities pulled back on their capital because of A, concerns during the pandemic about work getting done, and then B, the labor shortage and the cost of goods going up substantially and just availability of supply chain. So I don't know what happened in Fraser. I can just look at the big picture and say, this is what was expected, this is what was done, and that's what I know.
So based on what you've seen for the next 3-4 years out that we've already got in works, basically, does it look like it's adequate based on the fund balance, or should we be doing more based on what we have, or were you?
From an engineering perspective, I can't answer that. All I can do is look at what is in the capital plan and say that this funds it. We can fund the capital plan with the rates that are in the report, with cash.
Well, I guess I'm getting at, if we've got plans in the works for the next 3-4 years, we're hitting this neighborhood and this neighborhood next and all that. If we already got the money accounted for that, but you're saying we should be increasing rates more for beyond that time?
No, I'm
Or
not
for
saying that.
the
I'm
next-
just saying let's fund the capital plan that you have in place. You only have so much capacity to take on capital projects.
Right.
So I think DPW, and I can't answer, and I don't know if even the city manager knows, are you at your capacity with a $3.5 million a year project load? Obviously, that takes a lot of planning, engineering, shutting down streets, notifying people, all of that. Most cities don't like to have 6 different projects going on simultaneously across the city because it's too disruptive. So you've got to be careful about how you stage everything.
So, Mr. Odell, your question was, do we have enough fund balance right now to fund the projects for the next 3 years? Was that your question?
Correct, I mean.
No, we don't. No.
Not with cash, no.
No.
Well, I
Without
mean,
raising
now,
rates.
but at the current levels and with the cash reserve we have, you said that will not be enough to cover the next.
No.
Correct.
Because you've got about $10 million in the next 3 years of capital projects alone.
And I was under the impression back in 2017 that the Plant Moran study was to fund $2 to $2.5 million, and now we're at $3 to $3.5 million a year. And so inflation has taken.
Annually, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we don't, if we kept this current plan in place and stayed with the $3.5 million a year over the next 3 to 5 years, we would run out of money,
Yes.
including the reserves. We do not have enough money to keep reserves, run the system, and then do all those capital improvements. We
And
have to stretch those out over a longer period of time.
so I will say again that the model assumes all capital is funded with cash and rates, so there's no debt. One way to spread out the costs is to issue debt. Now, that obviously incurs debt issuance costs and interest costs. And now you've got a project that you're paying for 20 years. So that's why we're hoping that we can fund things with cash and avoid the debt.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
So did I answer the question about the 5/8 versus the 1-inch meter? And I'm hearing a pain point there that we might want to circle back on and present a couple of other alternatives.
Hundreds of customers.
Okay.
And the 1-inch residential meter. I use three units a month.
Okay.
I have 2 1-inch meters, so. And you're not doing a ready-to-serve charge on the irrigation meters.
No, you actually have what's called the deduct meter or deduction meter. So water flows from the city's service line into the home, one pipe, and then it goes into the meter. After that main meter, there's a secondary meter that's called the deduct meter that is measuring the water that's going specifically to an irrigation or outside hose bibs. That number is then, whatever volume is going through that meter is subtracted from the total billed to the sewer. So your billing has a lot of sewer credits because we're offsetting. The secondary meter is only for water, so we're not charging sewer on that.
And no ready-to-serve.
And there's no ready to serve on that now.
Just want to make sure.
And that's how it is now, and we're assuming it would continue that way. There are plenty of communities that have an irrigation system where the pipe comes up from the ground or from the wall, from the city service, and then it tees off just 2 separate meters. And a lot of times those get 2 separate charges. But in this case, in Fraser, you're not doing that. And I will say that the larger, as we get into larger meter sizes, what I noticed in your billing data, which I see a lot, any customer that has a large meter relative to their usage is going to be impacted more. So when I say that, if you can imagine a church with a 2-inch meter, and there's no school there, there's just Sunday service and maybe some meetings throughout the week. They might have a few bathrooms. And so they're not using a lot of water, but they have a 2-inch meter because at some point somebody decided that's what they should have. That particular customer, whether it's a church or a gas station or whatever it is going to see a larger impact because the ready to serve goes up, the commodity rate goes down, and they see a higher bill. That's something to be aware of as we work through the machinations of all these different calculations. So talking about the next topic, which is customer impacts, we can go to the next slide. Each customer is going to be impacted differently based on their meter size and their usage. And again, the larger customers with low usage are going to see the biggest impact. What I've seen in other communities is if there is a customer like that has a 2-inch meter or a 1.5-inch meter and they're hardly using any water at all, they can just downsize their meter. If they don't need it, they don't need it. The caution there is if the water for any fire suppression in the building is connected to that metered water line, then you have to be careful about downsizing it because you might violate the fire suppression capacity. Because we are phasing this in over 3 years, if the city were to adopt the rates that we have proposed at this point, the first 3 years will be the most volatile, with these changes impacting the larger customers the most. And then after that, it starts to just, everybody's equalizes in terms of who's paying what. I will say that prior to the 2017 rate study, the city did have a higher ready-to-serve charge. Plant and Moran advised and the city adopted a lower ready-to-serve and a higher usage charge. I believe their rationale for that was false and error because it was just based on the perception of fairness. And what we're dealing with here is engineering and hard numbers. We're not dealing with perceptions. I'm trying to suggest that we go back to the appropriate way for setting rates according to the American Water Works Association, which does reflect the proportionality question for those fixed costs and for the infrastructure costs.
Okay. Councilmember Baranski had another question.
Yeah, so if we're phasing it in over 3 years, is that 9.4 and 18% over the 3 years, or is that within the first year, those increases?
Let me change the numbers again. So using the rate structure that we proposed, the initial for the 5/8 inch customer would be 9.4, 8.6, 4%, 4.6%, 4%, 3%. So it goes down. And then for the 1 inch with 8
Wait,
units.
so hold on, so
Yep.
the first year you're seeing a 9.4% increase, the second year you're seeing an 8.4%.
8.6.
And then in 4 or 5 years, the increase is less
Then-
because we
and-
caught up and
Yes.
accumulated a surplus, but then you're seeing 3%, 3%.
Yeah, 4, 3%.
Oh,
but-
okay.
Yeah, it equalizes around there.
So it is just for the first year.
And then for the 1 inch meter, it's a little
No, then
longer.
my question was, it is just for the first year.
Okay.
Right. And then for the 1 inch meter, it would be the 18%, and then 17, and then 13, and then 5, and then it goes down from there.
Okay, thank you.
So again, this is really, and we can change, if we're using the mayor as an example here, his bill, thank you for putting yourself on the spotlight. Currently is $73 a month. It would go up to $94 a month, and then to $120 a month, and then $145 a month. In that particular example, because he's using less water. So the impact is greater.
Okay. And that's because I have a 1 inch. If I was, can you give us a price where 5/8? Which would be somebody in.
And I know this is reflective of more than customers than just you, so I'm just using.
Well, I
the
understand.
example as-
I understand.
right,
I just
right.
want to give, so.
Yes, so but using the 3 units, 1 inch, with the current rate structure, it would be a 16%, 16%, 12%, 6%, 6%, 4%. So it would be a little less. And somebody with a 1 inch using 8 units would be 12.5, 11%, 7%, 4%, 3.5%.
But 1 inch users, 1 inch residential users under this model are considerably more expensive than a 5/8.
Correct. And I don't know why there are certain neighborhoods that have 1 inch meters
It
installed.
was cool back in the 90s
Okay.
to put.
Well, if they
it
were
was.
put into the 90s, I suspect those meters are, well, I suspect the meters have been replaced since.
No, they have not.
Okay.
And I know we're considering that because they're 30 years old.
Yes, meters these days typically last 12 years, 10 years, especially if you have the auto-read ones.
Yep. Okay.
All right, I'll keep going. One thing that I have in here, that third bullet down, is grant funding. This is the wild card in all of this. If grant money becomes available and the city is fortunate enough to get some, that can really help the rates. I've also seen communities opt to keep the rate strategy going and to just do more work to accelerate some projects. So either way, you're improving the system or saving customers a little bit on the rates for a year or two.
Oh, so just to be clear, you're saying if we got grants, we could potentially reduce or moderate rates. Or we could just do more stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, is the government, the federal government has an infrastructure, I don't know if it was whichever act it was, there was hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure.
The Inflation Reduction Act,
I
yeah,
can't,
that does not, that would not cover anything in here. The
Darn.
Infrastructure Act, there was some money available. I think most of that's been spent already.
okay,
But there's always something else coming.
thank you.
And again, the last bullet on there is really talking about how customer choice impacts rates as well, and your revenue. So I'm hoping the next slide will actually have a chart on it. Oh, it does, good, okay. So this is the rate trajectory for, again, that 5/8 inch customer with 4.5 units of water per month. Their current bill is about $97, and then it goes to $106 and $115. So there's that 9.4% increase, and then the 8.6%, and then it stabilizes in future years. And the reason it's stabilizing is because we're making adjustments early, and then we're keeping the capital plan funded at about the same amount. So now that capital amount is just built into the rates, and the inflationary costs are whatever's happening just with all the other costs of the system. So that's why we're getting to that 3% or so later on. This is, I will say it again, and I understand, Mayor, you're used to working with models. I will say, honestly, this model is wrong because I can't predict the future. I can make assumptions, I can guess, but the cost of the system are going to change. I can't predict what Great Lakes Water is going to do 3 years from now, or the cost of pipe. So we're making assumptions about where things are going. And again, this is why we want to update this every year so that you're not falling behind. So those are some of the issues that we're going to deal with. The other thing that's up there is emergencies. If those happen, you just have to deal with them and get them done. But we'll have enough cash to handle in an emergency. So that's important, that we preserve the cash and be able to respond as needed. So, moving forward.
Before you move on, I have one more question, I'm sorry. So that rate, just so, because people are going to ask, this is an excellent demonstrative. So in 2031, the 137.50, is that all in, or is that just, would that include the ready to serve and whatever else? That's
Yes.
everything, okay, thank you, sorry.
So the darker bars on there for water and sewer, the dark brown or reddish is the ready to serve for sewer, and the
Got
dark
it.
blue is the ready to serve for water.
Okay, thank you.
So where does this all go from here? We'll go to the last slide. Council, first of all, and I haven't talked about this yet, needs to decide when you want to implement a rate increase. We are in the middle of a fiscal year. You've not, as I pointed out, raised rates for quite some time. So a mid-year rate adjustment certainly could be justified. We could also defer until next fiscal year. Some communities choose to do 2 rate increases in a year. When we're talking about increases of this size, it's probably not the choice you're going to make, but you're the policymakers. So one thing that you need to think about is when will a rate increase be implemented? And the longer you wait, either the more it goes up or the less capital you can fund. So that's the cautionary statement there. I have assumed a mid-year rate increase in the model, so a January 1 increase. Now, if that changes, we can change the model and adjust that. I've also assumed another rate increase. I can't remember if I left it in July or October of next year.
July.
So that'd be 2 in a year. And again, that's probably not your preference, but I'm looking to you to give me policy direction and to the manager so that we know what to do as we puzzle through this. I will probably be revising the model based on feedback that I get from council and from administration to make sure we're putting something together that is acceptable to the city, still meets the requirements, but is acceptable in terms of how we implement this. As you can see, this is complex. We're trying to do it in a thorough way so that we get it done right, and then we give you the tools to continue doing it. We will, at some point, once we get the final rate recommendations, the council will have to adopt rates, and again, that will include when you're implementing them. I will spend some time orienting staff to the model so that they know how to use it and what goes into it. So that will be a tool that you have here. If the city decides to engage municipal analytics to do the update, we can talk about that as well, but that's a tool that you would have. And again, I think I've said this once or twice, you have to do this every year. So please don't defer and assume that what numbers I looked at in 2024 are still going to be valid in 2030. They won't be. Things will change. So let's be ready to just keep reviewing this and keep on top of it. There is a movement to do continuous rate monitoring, where you're looking at this every quarter or every 6 months and just making sure you're on track, giving feedback to the council about where we're at, where we're going, so that you have a heads up when it comes time to thinking about rates again. So that's something to just be aware of. So we want to smooth the rates year over year. That's the best way. Annual updates is the best way to keep your rates low. If you had been updating for the past 6 years, even 3% a year, you would probably need a 1% increase right now. But we're not there. So this is what we're doing. We're trying to catch up a little bit and reposition the city to be in a solid place, starting as fast as possible and going forward. So that's the high level. There's lots more detail. You have the report. There's some more detail on that. I've got tons more detail here.
When you said my question was, you can provide update services, or you can implement that rate, make sure it gets into our BSNA?
I can help with updating the model.
Okay.
And as far as getting the information into BSNA, that is, I think your staff can handle that because we're not changing the rate structure. There have been instances where we've changed the rate structure quite a bit, and we need help. I can get people in to help with that. BSNA charges quite a bit to do that, but I have access to some resources that are much more affordable and probably better qualified.
Okay. So if we need those, we can. I'd like a second set of eyes on it, just for the comfort
Okay.
level of our administrators. If we adopt changes, I just would like to have.
Sure, I can get somebody to look at
If
that.
they're your rates, I would like to make sure that they're implemented the way you say, so a year from now, we.
Sure.
Good data it's done right, so.
I think that's fair.
I think that's yes, Mr. Odell, Councilmember Odell.
So with the change, the fixed costs are going to be more of the bill. So it's not, people using less units, it's not going to adjust as much as the current system as we have set up. That's why you're proposing that the variable cost goes more to the fixed cost. The variable cost won't change the bill as much. Am I understanding that in layman's terms correctly?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. So on our current model, what you said, what Plan Moran recommended was more unit-based
Yes.
rather than fixed cost base. You're saying convert more of our monthly bill to the fixed costs that we got to cover and less on the variable costs.
Right, so I just want to, I'm getting the word cost is throwing me off. So from a customer perspective, yes, it's a cost. From the city's perspective, it's a revenue. So yes, your costs that you are paying are highly fixed. Your revenue is highly variable.
Okay.
So we want to increase your fixed revenue so it's more stable, which means for the customer, there will be higher fixed cost or fixed bill.
Okay, so can you tell me, based on what you're presenting to us tonight, what's the difference for a 5/8 inch, a typical house in Fraser, if they use 3 units versus 4, like what, they use 1 less unit a month or 1 more unit a month, what is that approximately going to change their bill based on the new structure that you're proposing?
Give me a second to
Yeah, no
change that. Okay, so let's go with
That's
the,
a good question, but are you saying, in other words, how much will they save by lowering
Right.
water
So if
usage?
people are using less
Yep.
water rather than more water, how is that going to
right,
affect their bill?
so again, let me just say, if we go back to the second to the last slide, go back a couple slides. Okay, we'll use that as the basis. That's 4.5 units per month. Now, if we change that to 3 units per month, the percentage increase is a little easier to remember than all the numbers. In year 1, it'd be 9.5%. In year 2, 9.6%. In year 3, 4.9%, 5.5%, 5%. So it's slightly more than that, than what we're seeing using 4.5.
Okay, but you can't say like a
You,
typical
you want a dollar amount?
dollar amount.
Oh, sure. Okay, so right now, that customer using 3 units, 5/8 inch meter, if we shift to the AWWA, they're currently paying $73 a month on average. They would go to $79.93 or almost $80, so $7 a month increase. And then it would go up the next year to 87.5, so again, about $8 increase, and then to 90, almost 92, so a $2.50 increase, and again, it then smooths out after that. And then if that same customer, instead of using 4.5, uses 6, the percentages are very similar, 9.4, 8.1, 3.3, and their first month would go up from $121 to $132, so $11 increase for the 6 units a month. And we can run any number of scenarios in there by customer, but I can see you're looking for the sensitivity question.
Well, I'm looking, so if somebody's like, well, I'm just gonna use less water, what's that look like?
Yeah.
What's that look like to our customers? We got a new rate, your standard costs are gonna be fixed in higher, but your variable costs are gonna change, of your total bill, it's gonna be smaller, so, what's that look like for our
Right, and empirical studies that, there aren't a lot of them, but the ones that I've read suggest that there is some sensitivity to a rate increase if the increase is on a variable side. If the increase is on the fixed side, there's less sensitivity because there's nothing people can do about it. Honestly, it's just, okay, it's fixed. So people will modify where they can. So if the variable rate is going up, they're going to try to adjust. I would say most people today already have a lot of water-saving devices, low-flow toilets, water-saving shower heads, they water less, that's already all happening. More efficient washers, dishwashers. So we're running out of options other than just turning off the water when you're in the shower and, using less when you're washing dishes, doing larger loads of laundry. Those are still things that people can change their behavior. And we want people to be able to do that. And again, the struggle in rate setting is the more people save on water, the higher the per unit of water has to go up because so much of it is fixed. And I've mentioned a lot about your sewer costs are almost 100% fixed. So your Great Lakes water charge is 100% fixed. On the water side, 60% of the bill you get from Great Lakes is fixed. So only 40% is variable. So even on the water side, there's a lot of fixed costs that just don't change for the city.
Councilmember Shornack had a question.
Not really a question, more of a statement. Just to give you a little history, the reason why we have not increased the rates is because we had to force a PA 33 on our residents, which was a huge undertaking, and they didn't want it because we had to stabilize the city's finances because they were a train wreck. And then, of course, COVID hit, and we do have an aging population who are on a fixed income, and although I don't understand why everybody thinks that, but everybody thinks our water bills are like the highest in the world, but I talk to people in Warren and Sterling Heights and Clinton Township, and their bills, even if they're done, quarterly, are still as high as ours, and some of them are higher, actually, than ours now. But this is the pressure point, this is the pain point for our residents, is the water. And that is why we have not increased rates, because everything else in the world is going up, and we were trying, which of course, clearly, we are not going to be able to continue, but we were trying to mitigate, rising costs wherever we could as a board. And that, for the most part, is why we were not increasing the prices, because every single time we mention the word increase water rates, you want to talk about a packed house.
And I
it's going to
understand,
be
yes.
again, because people are going to have a fit. The thing is, and I understand fully why they're going to have a fit, but at the same token, obviously, we have very aging infrastructure. We have had for a long time. The city, right now, they're in my neighborhood finally. I mean, my street is a very small street, and we had 5 water main breaks one winter. And it was ridiculous. I mean, we have a really small street. So I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. So they're finally fixing that, because that is part of the wasted water, as you said, the 18%. So I guess what I'm saying to the residents is, everybody, yes, it's a pain point. Yes, nobody wants anything to go up. Unfortunately, this is where we are. And so we are going to have to institute a rate increase, whether we want to or not, because it's going to be a necessity in order to fix the infrastructure and hopefully have a plan moving forward throughout the next, several decades, to continue to keep our infrastructure in good repair, because that costs an astounding amount of money when it is not in good repair. So I guess that's kind of just the point I wanted to make to our residents who are watching, because believe me, they're going to show up in droves.
And I understand that. That is obviously an issue. We also know that water and wastewater is underpriced and undervalued in this country, has been for decades, because there's been so much government subsidy of it. So it is, at some point, you have to fix it, because we are pressing the lifespan of the systems that we have in the ground. And when we're looking at pipes in the ground that have been there for 100 years, I talked about the size of pipe. Even though you might have a 6-inch pipe in the ground, when it's been in the ground for 75, 80 years, the amount of water that can flow through that diminishes, just because of the calcium buildup and mineral buildup on the inside of it. So you're losing capacity just over time, which can severely impact your ability to fight a fire. I was just in a community where they had a loss of life because the fire department hooked up to the hydrant, and they turned it on, and they just got a little trickle of water coming out of it, because their 4-inch pipe had dwindled down to a 1-inch opening, because it had been in the ground for almost 100 years, and somebody died. We're trying to keep the system functioning and trying to keep it from breaking, and unfortunately, it costs money to do that, and because the customers pay for the system, that it falls on them to pay for it. It's like you buy a car, it runs great for a while, but then you got to replace the brakes and the tires, and eventually something else breaks and something else breaks. If you just keep driving it, pretty soon it's just going to fall apart. And that's what's happening with our infrastructure underground that we don't see. It's falling apart. And when you see water main breaks, you see sinkholes, that's a sign of problems. So we're trying to prevent that by investing in the system.
Other comments? Councilmember Baranski.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have 10 million in the fund now. We, per the, I'm going to say the capital improvement plan, we should spend 3 million a year in capital improvement.
3 to 3.5 million a year, yeah.
3.5. And we've been spending about $1 million a year on our projects. I thought that's what I read, maybe.
Well, again, the
Over just
5-year
this
period
time period, yep.
that I looked at, you spent about just under 2 million a year on average. But about half of that you funded with debt.
Okay, so, and that's where I was going to go. I was going to have 2 issues. One, what is in the works? Like, I forgive my memory lapse, but I don't know what we have planned coming down the pipe that is set in stone versus can be deferred. But secondarily, what can we bond versus pay cash for? I know that there is more cost when you bond it out, but these are really big numbers. And this is really big debt when we have 10 million sitting in the bank. Why do we need the 7 million? I guess let me start there. When you said we needed to have 7
Again,
million,
it's
what's that for?
that 25% of operations and maintenance just for working capital, so you have cash.
Got it.
When you need it. There's 1 year of debt service, so that you always have that debt service to pay the next year.
Got it.
Now, I'll back I can go down a little bit on the debt service reserve. I started with 125%, but because most of your debt is not your debt,
Right.
the bondholders aren't looking at the city for that. So, yeah, we could cut that back some. The other is, the biggest part, is about 3 million, 3.5 million a year, just having that much in hand for capital.
So the 7 million already included at least 1 year of,
Of capital.
got it. So the reserve that we're building up, although it's like a large chunk now to the homeowner, it takes a long time to get 3 million
Right,
cumulative.
right.
But we already have right now, we have on reserve, well, if I'm hearing you right, you can adjust these numbers down somewhat, because it's a model. We can make adjustments for the pipe issue with you could perhaps find alternatives that are more palatable to I'm assuming, the resident who has a 1-inch pipe versus the business owner who has a 1-inch pipe.
And that's, again, in the billing software, we can't assign a rate to a residential customer because we don't know who a residential customer is.
Is there a way we can figure that out to build that into the model?
That would require some staff time to do that.
Okay. When you say staff time, you mean city staff time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so if we could do that, we could then bring, and the businesses are going to go crazy, but we could bring the residents' bill more in line with what the rest of the residents are paying.
Again, yes, you can have a residential rate, you can have a commercial rate.
Okay. And that's something cities do?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we're not going to be unique or
No.
or singling out one or the other
No.
by doing
And,
that?
and part of the reason is, I mean, I won't go into the detail, but essentially there's a difference between what a business demands and on the water demand, they're usually going to demand water during peak hours.
Right,
during
which is more
business hours,
expensive.
Which is more expensive. And the wastewater that's going into the system is often more heavily polluted for a restaurant or an industry. So there's actually a separate charge from Great Lakes Water for industrial customers, which you are not passing on directly to those customers. It's just blended into the
Got it.
rate.
Should we, oh,
I was just going to say, so in the abstract, it actually makes sense to me, hearing you, to have a residential rate and a commercial rate so that it is, because if the goal is to pay for what you use, knowing we all have to pay to fix it, we all have to pay that and we all need to pay it up front to pay less in the long run, it seems to me that it would be a better business model to have a resident rate and a commercial rate as opposed to a pipe size rate.
And you would still have with the larger customers, you still have the meter size rate.
And that too, yeah, right, yeah. So that's what I would like to see, because these are large increases, and if we could lower the model to be more consistent with a debt ratio that's a little bit more realistic, since it's not our debt, and then accounts for resident versus commercial, it's slightly more palatable.
And to be fair, what I've presented is kind of the quote optimal solution. There are less optimal solutions that'll still get you where you need to go. What that would look like is we can lower the adjustment. Well, first of all, we can go back to your current ratios until we figure out the residential question. That's one option we can look at if that's what the council's directing. That's the preference. Another is to use more cash. So right now, we're bringing that cash balance down to the target level. I've actually got two lines on the cash. One is the absolute minimum, and the other is the desired. So we can go down some more and spend that. But what that would do is reduce the rate increases in the initial years and push those rate increases out further. So rather than getting to 4%, 3% in the later years, maybe we'd be at 5 or 6%. And then lower the current, the first few years down to 6 or 7. We can move those numbers around.
Flatten it but extend it.
Yes.
That would
That's
probably
more
be more I was going to say our residents would, that'd be way more palatable.
To me, it is, certainly. Those are my thoughts on this very tough pill to swallow.
Mayor Pro Tem Sutherland.
I think theoretically that does sound preferred, but what I would want to know is from Ms. Levin is, what kind of resources that would take from the city to be able to accomplish something like that, knowing that, you're already taxed, everyone's doing everything that they can. Like, is that something within a reasonable time frame that could even be feasible? What does that look like, I guess?
And I don't really know exactly what that would involve doing. I would think you probably have a little bit better.
I would say, let's assume 90-some% of 5/8 inch meters are residential. And given what I'm hearing about the approximate number of the 1-inch meters, you have something like 1,000 or 1,100 1-inch meters. So if
But so then that's information that as a city we have on hand, who has 5/8, who has 1 inch.
we know which customers,
So then
right?
that would be a little bit less of a lift than not having that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hire a temp is my short-term,
Well,
yeah.
and that's kind of where I was
Yeah,
going.
you have 1,356
We can give you
1-inch.
Yeah.
we can get the street names for all the 1-inch meters.
Right, and identify which ones are residential and which ones are commercial.
And
right.
then call BSNA and have them help you.
And again, it's just getting, you have the field in the database, it's just empty.
It would involve really going through every single account and checking a box, is this residential or business?
Oh, there's a
A
class
lot of it
code.
can be done from a bulk perspective based on the addresses, known addresses. This is a residential area, we can easily select all of those. But
Well, and
yeah,
that's
like
kind of
you
what I was
said,
trying to figure out. Is it a couple of days of someone sitting in a room buckling down with Excel, being able to figure this out? Is it a temp? Is it a full-time? Like, what is that? What's the time frame? What does that look like? Because that's going to be important in the time frame with which it takes us to determine whether or not we're going to increase rates.
And I think we might look at that as a long-term, maybe next year when you're reviewing the rates, you have that information a year from now, rather than in the next 6 weeks. And if you are looking at a meter replacement program, and I don't know how close you are to that, that's a perfect opportunity, physically going into a place, and you know whether it's a residential, commercial, industrial, government, school, whatever you want to call it. So you can identify them case by case when you're installing the meters, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
So as far as rates go, I want to move to the AWWA standard. I don't want to be off standard any longer than we have. Looks like that was the first year, and we were supposed to eventually get there maybe in the model, but I couldn't find it.
Okay.
And then as far as a residential or commercial rate, that would be something in the meter sizes, select 5/8 1-inch meter is a residential size, and that would be, I would like every gallon of water coming out of the pipe to be the same cost for residential and commercial customers. So when you turn on your faucet, if you get a gallon at Speedway, or you get a gallon at your house, it costs 2.2 cents.
Yes.
But the other costs are in the base charges. And that's, I just want
Yes,
to
and-
clarify
yeah.
that that's where I would be. I don't like the idea of the commercial, we used to have that, where commercial customers would pay an extra $1 a unit.
Okay.
And then that went away.
No, we're not looking at doing that.
No, I just want to make sure that that wasn't part of the consideration. So if our team can use your help and it makes sense, I would like to see that happen. And then as far as the options go, we either collect less money and do fewer projects over a longer period of time, or you raise the rates to what we need to fund $3.5 million. So our three components are Great Lakes Sewer, well, county sewer, Great Lakes Wholesale Water, and then our third one is this capital improvement. And
Those are the
really
big
goes up-
costs, yes.
Goes up by $2.5 million over what we've averaged over the past several years.
It's a big increase.
And $5 million of that was the 14-mile project and the PRVs, which were $2 million right there. So we haven't done a lot of the residential projects that we talked about in Venetian Village, Venetian Woods, and we need to get to those. So I guess we want to do everything.
Right, and not pay for it.
And not, I understand.
And that's what everybody wants, obviously.
Any other questions? All right. Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question or All right. Would you mind if answering a couple questions from folks?
If council gives me authority and
I
permission.
think this is a good opportunity to hear from people about, you, Frank, you wanted to talk? Well, we're going to have Kent first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken Stonebreaker, 32309 Oxford Court. My main question is the ready to serve, which I understand everything and it makes all good sense to me. But there's some businesses within the city that have fire suppression units that don't have a meter on it.
Correct.
And they aren't paying anything. If I remember what happened years ago, I was in this debate in the same chambers, 7 years ago. And I'm wondering, is that figured into these costs as well? The people that have ready-to-serve meters, or not even meters, they're just ready-to-serve fire suppression, and they aren't paying anything for that luxury. And I'm wondering, is that figured into this process as well?
So let me just make sure I work on a lot of these, so I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. You do have fire suppression meter charges, well, a fire suppression charge. But I think fire suppression is a philosophical question to a degree. Because if a building owner goes through the expense of installing a fire suppression in their building, if there is a fire, the public resources needed diminish substantially. So the fire truck, the firefighters don't need to spend as much time on site. They might not even have to spend any time. The water that's used is going to be about the same amount that you're taking from the fire hydrant. Now, if you're charging people for fire hydrant use in a fire, which you probably are not, then you have to ask, why would we charge somebody for putting out a fire on their own? That's the philosophical question.
I get it. But there were certain businesses that were required to meter.
Yes.
And I'm also an employee, I'm a retired employee from somewhere where there's a ready-to-serve meter on the there's a meter on the building. You can have nothing going on that at all, ever, but you still get a monthly charge for ready-to-serve. So that water, we're paying as a city ready-to-serve charges for X amount of customers, X amount of water. And that is one of the meters that is a ready-to-serve. It's not even a meter, it's a hookup to the system, and they aren't paying to have that luxury, and it's an insurance policy. As you're stating, it's a luxury that we don't, as taxpayers, don't have to worry about it as much with the fire department. We have some kind of suppression, but they're getting that luxury for free. So you're right, it's a philosophical
Yeah, and again,
question,
I don't know that it's free because they paid for it.
Well, they paid to put it in.
Right.
But when it goes off, it's their insurance policy, and everybody pays money for their insurance.
And again, if the fire department shows up,
Right. We're in, but my
so
point
fire
is
suppression is one of those things. The AWWA has a very technical approach to calculating that. Most systems that I work with don't have the capacity to get the data to do that level of analysis.
Right. I'm just looking if there was a monthly fee or something that they would get, whatever it is, according to a 4-inch pipe that may be used for fire suppression.
Elaine, I'm drawing a blank. Is there a fire suppression charge in the city for? No. Okay. So there are systems that charge for a fire line. They call it a fire line charge. The question is, what cost would you be recovering if you're charging a fee for that? So if they have a meter, and there are some communities that put a meter on their fire suppression, they'd be paying for that meter over time. Another is every now and then those systems need to be inspected. So maybe you're going to spend a little bit of money inspecting those systems to make sure there's nothing inappropriate going on, there's no leaks, that sort of thing. If there's a leak, somebody's usually going to tell you, or they're going to fix it because it's literally getting in their building. It's dripping from above. So it's really a philosophical question on fire suppression. And I am of the opinion that I would rather every unit and a city had a fire suppression system internally, and we didn't have to rely so heavily on fire departments and fire hydrants. That's my preference.
Okay. Someone else. Let's go with Frank. Mr. Farina, please.
Frank Farina, 15485 Rambling Drive. My question has on the reserve. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I had a mortgage, I didn't have 1 year's mortgage in advance in the bank when I'm making payments on a monthly basis, which is the same thing we do in our debt. I can see having a portion of that as a reserve, but I can't see having a year or 100 to 125% in advance. Okay, that's one. Ready to serve is a fixed cost, I understand that, but in many cases, you, Mike, me, there's 2 people in the house. We use 3 units. That has to be prorated somehow to people. There are people in here that only have 1 person in the house. I mean, it doesn't seem fair to me or equitable that they would be charged the same as a business that uses more units per thing. My bill every month is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's because that's the minimum you can pay.
That's you're using 5 units, I think.
Yeah. But anyway,
So let me just say, I understand the issue of affordability. Affordability is a huge issue that the industry and local governments, state governments, and the federal government have struggled with forever. And as costs go up, affordability becomes an even bigger question. If we look at it purely from a mathematical perspective and a rate philosophy perspective, we're trying to recover the cost of the system. And just because somebody has 1 person living in the house or 12 people, I grew up in a family of 15. Fortunately, we were on a well. We needed a lot of space. That service is still there for that household. So if people show up on Christmas Day and you've got 20 people in the house, you don't have to go out and buy a bigger meter. The service is there. It's ready to serve you. That's the reason it's there. I understand the question. The question of equitability really comes down to the usage, how much you're using, and then what the cost is. So we need to recover the costs and pay for the system, and we can't put it all on the large users because they have cost limitations as well. So that's the struggle in setting these rates. I did just work for a smaller community that actually based their rates previously on the number of people living in their household. Talk about a violation of privacy and an administrative nightmare. Who is auditing how many people live in a house? So I would prefer that rates are always low. The fact is we have to pay for things. As far as the reserve goes, the 120% is a standard, 130% in that range is a standard number for what they call a coverage ratio, or you have that much in reserve for a revenue bond. That's where that number originally comes from. You don't have revenue bonds. You have a general obligation bond, a drinking water SRF loan. So yes, we can lower that some, but having something there is just good practice. And honestly, that's a small number relative to all the other ones. I think the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, on reducing the reserve is to reduce the amount held for capital. And again, we can reduce that initially and then slowly build it up so that we reduce the impact on all customers, large or small.
All right. One other question. The question you answered for Mr. Stonebreaker about having a fire suppression system. I work for General Dynamics. I manage the buildings for all of General Dynamics. we had to have fire suppression in there because we got lower insurance rates. And that's why they do it, is lower insurance rates, not a lesser feed from the city or anything like that. They get back lower insurance rates on what they do.
Okay.
The study you wanted to go do, I think is very easily done. You have Google Maps. You can go through and count every house in Fraser. What's a house and what's a building? I'd be happy to help out doing that, you know? There's a voter registration that tells you how many registered voters there are.
We don't want to start billing by people.
But I get your point on that. Yes, you could do the Google Maps thing. It just takes
It's not a big
time.
study to do. All right, thanks.
All right. Lufo, I think you wanted to speak? Okay.
Paul Salufo, 316400 Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is, when I was on council, we had a parasitic number, and it was always fluctuating between 10 and 11, and now our parasitic number is 16, is what I think you said, correct?
What do you mean by parasitic?
loss.
Oh, water loss, yes. 16 to 18, yeah.
That's a number that really needs to be looked at close. That's money that we're paying all the way around for. It does absolutely nothing but erode our infrastructure. The other thing, too, is the number for the parasitic entry into our sewer lines. That's another number that we're also paying for. In other words, the water that goes in there that's not actually sewer, it's groundwater that's going in there. So those things have to be looked at close. I think as a resident, I'd like to see somebody look at that a little closer. I know it has gone up over the years, and we have less, you might not believe this, but we have much less water main breaks in this city than we did when I was on council. So our advantage to looking at that now is we have a little more time to do that. I think it's important. It would bring all the numbers down. I think you would agree on that. And it's important, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Okay. Council, any questions that you'd like to have him look at? Mr. Kazer, I forgot your name.
That's okay.
Mr. Kazer,
I forget
look at, or
sometimes.
any particular things? Can we send those kind of requests?
Yes,
come up with
send them
that?
to the city manager, and she can forward them to me, and we will work on a revised. I can come back with another option or two and say, here's this or that, and I know Plant Moran did that through several revisions. I'm happy to do that to get something that works as best as it can for your community.
Okay. I think we have some discussion to do about what our priorities are as a council in order to balance the need to fix the system and to unfortunately charge people to fix the system. So,
Right.
all right. Any other comments? I thought you did a really good job on this. It was consistent with what I understood as far as needs and things, and just the capital improvement. Now that we're at $3.5 million a year, that's a bit more than.
Right, and I would appreciate some guidance, again, policy perspective. Is the council willing to consider debt to smooth out the rate some? And that's the question you can answer. You don't have to decide now, but that's, we can put that in there with an initial debt issue and see what the impact would be on rates. And obviously, if you're paying with debt now, the rates now go down, but 20 years later, you're still paying for it, so.
Yeah, I'd be interested in looking at that, and I don't know if we are eligible for any DWRF loans or any low-income.
Yeah, that's a
things,
question for your engineers.
But then, looking at bonding, I would be interested in seeing what the differences could be. Councilmember Baranski.
Yeah, so do you mean like incurring debt now?
Well, in the next year or so
Oh, yeah, I mean, I
to
just,
pay for
like,
some
we have the
capital.
money right now. I was thinking like in the future, debt.
Right.
Lowering the amount now, like in my head, I'm like, lower these numbers now for all the ways you discussed. And then maybe in year 3, if we have a large project, bond that out because we don't have enough reserves stocked up, but we need to get that project done.
Right.
So we get it done, sooner, but we have to pay longer through debt.
Right,
That, in
and-
my
and-
head, is more palatable than incurring debt now when we have the reserves we have now.
And my approach to that is often looking to see where you've got debt coming off, and can we somehow, feather them together and reduce the overall impact? And possibly looking at funding 2 or 3 years of capital with debt, and then using that time to plug the gap so that we don't ever have to issue debt again.
Sort of like how the schools do it. Bond falls off, new one comes on.
Well, yeah, we're not going to try to do that over
No,
and over
but
again.
that's the concept. I like that.
Initially, yes.
That would be appropriate for me.
Okay.
I don't know how you guys feel.
Any other? All right. I think anything you'd like to add, Council, or City Manager? All right. Thank you very much.
And I appreciate the staff's help in all this, too. They've been immensely helpful with answering a lot of questions and giving me a lot of data.
All right. Item 7C is to set the public hearing date and time for consideration of water and sewer rates for fiscal year 24-25. I was going to suggest that we do this at the November regular meeting.
Is that enough time to get the questions in and get the analytics all?
I can do the analytics the model's built. It's just a matter of
Plugging
which
it in.
variables I need to change.
Yeah, and if we hold the public hearing and we don't take action that night, we will have held the public
Yeah,
hearing.
November works.
So if we just do it for the regular meeting, we get that.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, I would make a motion to set public hearing date and time for consideration of water and sewer rates for fiscal year 24-25 to be November 14th? I'm sorry, I should have had that date in my head. It would be November 14th, 2024. All right, motion by Mayor Lesich, second by Councilmember Odell to set the date and time for consideration of water and sewer rates for fiscal year 24-25 as November 14th. Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Aye for me, too. And so the date is set. Entertain a motion to, any comments from the public to finalize the meeting? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember Baranski, second by Councilmember Shornack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much at 8:21 p.m.